Gary has in the past of emotions, a lot of drama, whether it's yelling, fighting, dancing, but these have to be expressed because it's the language of the soul that comes through different ways that we manifest our lives, be it art, dancing, fighting, war. These things need to be expressed so we can look at them and learn how to embrace them, say we own this, and hopefully learn how to love them and eliminate the distortions that we all give. And I think Putin and Trump are leading us into a world we don't know how to navigate. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in terms of looking at emotions, I thank you, John, for raising that point. I think creating a environment, cultivating an environment that supports and embraces and allows the free expression of emotion. We know how important that is, and we know that when people shut down, and I'm in the psychology profession, and I know when people learn to repress their feelings and deny their emotions, it comes out sideways. So the open access and the ability to express our feelings openly, directly, honestly, authentically is truly an important aspect of our lives. And obviously we have seen a lot of that expression of a lot of emotion after the elections. A tremendous amount of people coming out and sharing their anger, their frustration, their outrage, and there's a healthiness to that, because I think that allows people to be able to directly, openly speak out and share their thoughts and feelings. Marianne Williamson, I also like to reference, who wrote a book called Healing the Soul of America, talked about how it's important to take our inner spiritual beliefs or inner spiritual work that we do, and how do we take that into the world, and how do we channel in a way that is done in a way that is productive, and how do we do it in a way that is for a higher good, for a common good, and how do we express our emotions in a way that is going to work towards a purpose, a higher purpose, or a soul purpose, or a sense of mission. So those are important things that, and I also like to kind of ponder and ask us as a group to look at and to explore, and also those who are listening in terms of how do you find your own voice, in terms of your own self-expression, and where do you find your own power and empowerment within yourself. So those are thoughts about things to ponder that I'd like to just put out there, and if anybody wants to take a shot at responding or any thoughts about that, I certainly invite more conversation, dialogue.
And if anybody has any questions, please type them in on the website. We're
So
not getting
we can
anything.
answer them, but I was going to say, like, the immediate emotion that comes to mind is righteous indignation that's happening now with people against Trump and his efforts to repress our rights, you know, and that everybody's just getting very angry. How dare you do this? You know, we're in the United States of America. We're a democracy. We have inalienable rights that we uphold in our Constitution. How can you go against the Constitution, which he's basically doing? So I think the first reaction is righteous indignation and anger, and I think that is good. It's like you said, it's good to express your emotions, it's good to get it out, it fuels the energy within you, it makes you proactive, it makes you move. So people are starting to move, they're going on marches, they're demonstrating, they're writing their congressmen and their senators, and that's all good, because we've been kind of apathetic for a long period of time, so that now it's really firing people up and inspiring them to take action. But the other part of it also is not just having a reaction, like you say, you just can't be reactive. You also have to be proactive. And to be proactive, I think you have to have a vision.
Yes.
A vision of what you want rather than what you don't want as well. So what I've been informed is that, from Spirit for many years, is that people should get together in these visioning groups and ask each other, what do you want from your society, from your community, from your government, from your legislators? What do you want? What do you need? What is missing that you think they can help you gain or gather or put together? What is missing in this picture right now that we have of Trump and his cohorts and the repression of our societies and our rights? What's missing here? What do we need to maybe guarantee or a fail-safe, or checks and balances against such things, which supposedly has been written into our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, but it seems like it's being infringed upon. So, do we take political action? Do we sue the government? Do we form, community organizations to be watchdogs, of our legislators? Do we do this? Do we do that? These are the kinds of questions I think people need to ask to express then a proactive vision for themselves based on an emotional reaction, and righteously so, of infringements on their rights and privileges as human beings. So that's my reaction to what you're saying.
Yes. And Marianne Williamson talked about citizen salons. Actually, back in the 90s, she started this whole movement of citizen salons, which are small circles of people getting together to share and express their concerns about the government, and to really step into their own power, because it is about we the people, and how do we the people step into our own power in terms of the kind of government we want to have. The true idea in terms of our Constitution is that the leaders of our government, the people that are in office, are actually serving us. Yes. And it's part of, we have a right and duty and responsibility to let them know how we want them to serve us, not about how do they want to have more power. And if we don't take the power back and we don't step into our own power, there's certainly a potential that power can run away, and it can get loose, and it can get out of control. So taking back our own power means doing things, actions, whether it's making phone calls. There's a group right now, there's a movement that's going on called Resist. There's several meetups, thousands of meetups throughout the country of people getting together who are forming, I would say, citizen salons, similar to what Marianne Williamson started back in the 90s. They're happening now. So it's an evolutionary process to begin to have these conversations, these dialogues. And that's kind of what we're having right here. In some way, this is a citizen salon, I would say. This is a group of citizens. We are citizens. You are citizens. And this is a conversation about how do we take back our power, how do we find answers, and what is our truth, and what are the kind of qualities that we want to see portrayed in the world of government. And one thing I've learned is that we want to see those qualities portrayed by our leaders. We must then begin to first start demonstrating those qualities within ourselves. Mm. If we want leaders to show a sense of love, acceptance, appreciation, understanding, then we need to show love, acceptance, appreciation, understanding from ourselves. So it begins with me. It begins with each one of us. And so that's part of the challenge. How do we invoke those qualities? How do we claim those qualities in ourselves so that we can ground those qualities, and that leaders that have those other kinds of qualities that are those shadow qualities, they won't be needed anymore, because we won't have those shadow parts of ourselves won't continue to be running us. So that's again something from a higher self perspective. How do we find more compassion for ourselves? It comes back to that notion.
I would say that we and you get in touch with your creative self, your magical self, as Seth used to talk about the magical self, whether it's music or art, writing, poetry, because there's where our power lies, when we can feel creative from our own minds and our own hearts, and we can manifest that out on paper, stage, dance, then we're expressing our emotions in a constructive way, and there are always people that are looking for constructive answers that they could trust. Newspapers, it's indirect knowledge, but anything that you have that gives you creativity. It may be your children, it may be the way you cook food, it may be the way you talk to your neighbors. This is all interaction that comes from ourselves. It's not something we're giving mouth to because we read it or heard it. And that we need to trust these moments. And again, it requires emotions. We need to learn to trust our emotions. We certainly did when we were children. We weren't going around beating up kids or shooting people. But over the years, our society and different authority figures have distorted their energies so that we listen to our leaders and our speakers, and we lose touch with our own inner vitality, that magic that we all have. And we see it particularly, at least in these last couple of years, manifested through music, dance, acting. These are really great ways to represent what's inside of us. When we hear good music, we feel good. When we hear bad news, we don't feel good. So we just need to check in with that routinely every day. Just sit by yourself and for 5 minutes, do whatever. Be playful with it. Have fun with it. I don't have any dogma. You just put the intention and it'll come out because it's there. So.
Thank you, John. And I think that what that speaks to is as we embrace our own voice, or as we strengthen our own inner voice, and through whatever means, whatever mechanism that we choose, whether it's music, creativity, poetry, meditation, finding a way to get in touch with our own voice. And that's an important piece, because when you turn on the TV at night, you listen to the news, whose voice do you hear? You hear someone else's voice, who is yelling and screaming and saying all kinds of things. And so one of the things, sometimes we have to turn off the television and tune into our own inner vision and find our own inner voice and be able to express that and know that that part of our psyche is extremely important and extremely valuable. And taking that outside of ourselves, so it's not just about how do we cultivate that within ourselves, but how do we cultivate that also outside of ourselves, so that we create a world, we create a society where we honor and we respect and we validate the voice of all people, that each person's voice is important, that each person from each culture is important. And how do we, how do we take those spiritual values, those spiritual tools, and bring them into the world. And I know that many of us are healers in different ways. I know that Chaz is a healer, and he uses tools such as hypnosis to help people you use your tools to help people to tap into their own inner power, to step into their truth, to overcome addictions, to overcome things that keep them stuck in their own in their own psyche. And I think that how we take these tools and how do we use those kinds of technologies, so to speak. I know there's lots of technologies that are that we have learned about that are more and more becoming available to the masses. And how do we educate people about these technologies and that are available, whether they're crystals, whether there's different kinds of mechanical devices that have been developed through people who have visionary ideas that might be even helping us to open ourselves up to higher levels of energy. All these different kinds of resources are available to us.
Binaural beats, biofeedback, the list goes on and on.
Right, and these tools are important to make them available to people. They won't be paid for by medical assistants, unfortunately. And those people who don't have the money or don't have the financial resources may not have access to these kinds of tools. And so one of the things I like to see and challenge is how do we bring these kinds of technologies and tools such as energy healing and Reiki and positive psychology, spiritual techniques that have been found to be of value. I work in a mental health organization where I actually bring some of these modalities to people that are disenfranchised, and I find that bringing these kinds of tools out to those people who don't have an opportunity are delighted to have a chance to experience these different kinds of technologies or these different kinds of resources that are available.
I want to say something about that. I have a friend, Zoana Gepner-Muller, and she's a healer. And her son, Elon Gepner, was raised within a kind of a healing environment, so he's very much used to Reiki and understanding meditation. So much so that he decided to devote his life to teaching meditation in public schools. And so that's what he's about, is he's through something called the YES program, which is actually sponsored by a guru in India originally, is to teach conflict mediation and peaceful resolution of conflict through meditation, as well as just also tuning into what we call the inner voice, the inner self.
Yes.
You know, that you've been talking about, that we all need to do more so, because it's important in public schools that this be done, because there is so much contention, possible violence, so much bullying,
Yes.
that they found that meditation is the key. It does help people calm and center and ground, get in touch with their inner self, get in touch with their inner authority, which is really the question here, because I think bullying occurs when there's a lack of knowing your own inner authority, and as well from the bully, as well as from people who are being bullied. So if they can get more in touch with their own inner voice and therefore own inner authority, there'd be less and less of that
Right.
opportunity for bullying and for conflict. So I feel that's really important now, is to educate students really from kindergarten up to spiritual technologies like meditation, like prayer, whatever, like, you know, affirmations, that we know about through our own personal spiritual journeys, that it should be started like from an early age on up. And it seems as if it is starting. There are many programs I've read about throughout the country that have just begun now, in teaching children meditation. And they're starting it usually in the inner city schools, because that's where it's needed the most. And they're finding such amazing things are happening to these kids because of that. So not only just the creative arts are needed, but also the spiritual arts are needed to create a child who has definitely a sense of themselves, a deeper, more healthier sense of themselves, their own empowerment, their own voice,
Right.
and wanting to give expression to that voice.
Right. And I think it's wonderful for children at such a young age to be given the opportunity to tap into their own inner resources, and to even have the understanding that their inner voice has some value, and that it's important for them to express themselves. Learning about self-expression at a young age is a very important piece. And in some schools, there are schools like the Waldorf schools that teach that, and where children are encouraged to live a more creative life, and to be more playful, and to dream, and to think about the kind of life that they want to live. And so starting from the ground up from a child is very important. And so part of the challenge here is, how do we bring these kinds of tools to others, to outside of our realm? How do we open up more dialogue, conversation with others? Because some of these tools are really about, the bottom line is, how does one find one's voice?
I wanted to read something else from Jane Roberts.
Sure.
Okay.
Seth's talking about the self, and this is certainly coming into our view, our psychic lens, so to speak, with what's going on politically, and not just in our country, but around the world. And Seth said in March 7th, 2012, on the self, when people are convinced that the self is untrustworthy for whatever reason, or that the universe is not safe, then instead of luxuriating in the use of their abilities, exploring the physical and mental environments, they begin to pull in their realities to contract their abilities, to over-control their environments. They become frightened. Frightened people do not want freedom, or mental or physical freedom. They want walls, and that's my input. They want shelter, a definite set of rules. They want to be told what is good and what is bad. They lean toward compulsive behavior patterns. They seek out leaders, political, scientific, or religions, who will order their lives for them so they can feel that they live in a safe universe. That's not the way to do it. It's not easy, but walls are not going to keep out people. Walls and laws will not keep out emotions. We're human beings. We're here to be creative. And I have to keep going back to emotions, because I've seen it demonstrated a lot in a place like Camden, and even in my own family. Emotions that are not expressed will start distorting our view of our external world. And it's no matter how it sounds, the emotions is a good place to start with this. It's a complex web that we are, and we need to start with looking at ourselves, trusting ourselves, accepting who we are, the good, bad, the ugly, and start from there. It's fun, and it's very empowering.
To comment about that, I just want to say that John had the opportunity to go to a boarding school when he was growing up called Windsor Mountain, which was based on the teachings of several people who
Well,
are
Anna Ford's student.
and who were about educating children to their emotions, because they believe that's why the rise of Nazism occurred
Yeah.
so easily, is that the German people repressed their emotions routinely in their culture, and so were able to, like, you know, allow for a leader like Hitler to come forth, just like in a sense we're allowing Trump to come forth, who some people think have Hitler-like qualities, but we don't know for sure. So it is important that we do educate our emotions, in that we allow them to be fully expressed, allow them to then create the need for action, as I said before, taking action, and also creating a vision. I think that all can come from expressing your feelings. You know, even just talking now to each other and expressing our feelings. I'm feeling empowered to take action, or to create more of these opportunities for people to talk. So yeah, I think it is very important. Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that struck me, John, to what you just read, is that there is in certain societies and cultures, when there's a void or an emptiness of expression, of a self-expression, or when self-expression is thwarted and controlled, people look to leaders to give them direction. They look to leaders for the answers. And so they look outside of themselves for truth. And what we know is that truth lies within. That wisdom, we have our own inner wisdom and our own inner power. And that if we learn how to activate that, we learn how to cultivate that, then it becomes, we become more powerful, we become more empowered, and there's a sense of more equanimity. Which is another one of the virtues, you know, of a society that is a democratic society. It's based on the balancing of powers, the ability, the checks and balances, so that a judge who can put forth some kind of a statement to counteract an executive order has respect and has validation, so that's the Congress, and so that all parts of democratic society, each part has an important role, an important value, and so it's about how do we create these, start out with small pockets of democratic societies, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a family, whether it's in the arts or in culture or whatever aspect of society. Continuing to cultivate and then activate. So it's really about starting with going within, cultivating it, beginning to develop those kinds of qualities, and then moving towards an activation process. So the cultivation and the activation are go hand in hand, and that's kind of what I'm getting in terms of the message that's coming through for me, is that we not only must develop, create, cultivate, but we must activate. So activate is through action, is through doing. So we are human beings, but we're also human doings. Sometimes we forget that the human doingness, and some human beings become too much focused on doing, spend a lot of time and energy on doing, and not enough on being. So I think a balance is really important. It's very important that we find a way to be, to allow ourselves to be who we are, allow ourselves to be fully who we are, and then to take the being into doing and take it into the world, take the show on the road, so to speak. So we're doing right now. We are human beings, and we are doing. This is our beingness, doing action right now, in having this this event that we're doing here, this salon, so to speak, this dialogue, where we are expressing. And so I invite the other members of the board to feel free to express your own thoughts that anything's emerging for you about how important it is for you to express yourself. How is it important for you with the people you work with to express themselves? How do you find expression and articulation of your own thoughts and beliefs to be of importance in your relationships with people? It could be as simple as your family relationships, your personal relationships, your relationships with your clients, I know that all of us, value communication, and we, as a board, as an advisory board, we spend a lot of time having dialogue and
Yeah.
conversation, sometimes very animated conversation, and that's a good thing. We might have different opinions about a topic, and that's a very important aspect of a group of people, to be able to disagree and respectfully disagree, and come to a common awareness or a common understanding for one another. So those are some thoughts that I'm putting out to the group here.
And we invite you to ask your questions.
Is there
by
any comments
typing.
so far that we
Nothing
can look
yet,
at?
no.
Or you might have comments. If anything got stimulated in you as we're speaking,
Yeah.
feel free to share them with us.
Even if they're snide remarks.
So maybe why don't we, does anyone have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on a
Sure.
few things. A lot of good material covered here this evening. I especially like some of the comments that Gary made about inalienable rights and that the government is here to serve us. So I have a little bit of a different kind of spin on things. And, many of you viewers and many of the people that I interact in with daily life would kind of maybe consider me as like a conspiracy theorist. But I ask you to, first of all, not believe anything that I say here tonight, but to research it for yourself, to find out this information yourself like I and many others have found. I ask you to research this outside of mainstream media. Why? Because all of our TV and radio stations and newspapers are now owned by, I believe it's a dozen companies.
That's 6.
John, that's six to 12 companies out there own everything. So all this information is being controlled and it's being fed to us in a very specific way. As a hypnotherapist over the years, I've learned some things about hypnosis, obviously. If you research what's called the flicker rate when it comes to television programming, you'll learn that the way that the picture changes and that flicker rate occurs will actually take us from what's called beta waves, beta brain waves that we're in most of our waking state, down to alpha and theta. Alpha is a brainwave state that is reached when we start to fall asleep. It's also reached in light hypnosis, light meditation, and theta is deeper states and delta even more. So what happens, I'm sure we've all seen children in front of the TV and they're sitting there and they're just totally tranced out. They are in a trance. And we get the same way. I mean, we watch a good movie. Can you tell me when you actually stop realizing you're in your apartment and when you're immersed in that movie? No, that's when you switch over and you're going into a state of trance. It's called television programming for a reason, people. When you repeat the same information, the same message over and over again, that's hypnosis. So we're bypassing the critical factor, which is a fancy name for the conscious mind, and we're getting into the subconscious, the big boss that controls 95% plus of the show. So when that flicker rate is occurring and our brain waves go from beta down into alpha and theta, now we're in that trance and that repetitive message is being played over and over. How many of us don't remember certain things that happened last week, but you play a theme song from a show when we were kids and we instantly remember that? Or we remember slogans or jingles because they've been repeated so many times. I believe that there is an elite controlling the government and attempting to control the world. It may sound a little crazy, but bear with me here. So Woodrow Wilson spoke about a new world order following World War II and what they called a League of Nations, a call for a League of Nations. I'm sorry, World War I, I stand corrected. Bush Sr. spoke of this back in 1990. There's information, you flip over the dollar bill, what's the all-seeing eye there at the top of the pyramid. There's a lot of messages, there's a lot of things backing this information up. An old friend of mine used to always say, follow the money. If you want to find the truth, follow the money. Follow this uphill. I believe that Trump is in for a reason. I'm no fan of Trump's, I'm no fan of Hillary's, I'm no fan of politics in general. However, I understand what's going on with all this, and I follow it close enough to realize this and to do the research. to me, it's almost like in the movie The Wizard of Oz, where they pull back the little curtain, and there's the little guy, and he's working, he's the Wizard of Oz, he's working the controls. I feel like the 1% in our country does this. Families like the Bilderbergers, DuPonts, Rockefellers, Soros, all these people, they're pulling the puppet strings. Information has come to light where Soros has funded these violent protests. If you look at certain false flags, Google that if you don't know what that is, you'll see that there's these crisis actors. These people appear over and over again. How can one person be that unlucky that they're at 9/11, that they're at this bombing? They're everywhere. It's the same people all the time. So something's going on here. I'm asking you to be a critical thinker, to turn off that TV sometime and just say, does this really make sense, this message? Why would it? What's the motive behind it? Follow the money. There's so much fear in this country now. It's all about, what's Trump going to do? They're going to take these rights. And we have to stand up to this, yes, but not in a fearful manner. I believe it's Course in Miracles says there's only two emotions, love and fear. Everything else is just, it's a part of that. I think we need to focus more, on the love. Gary stated three very important words: love, acceptance, and compassion. And I know that's a challenge in these times, but that's part of the lesson here, people, is to learn this and to learn how to not be afraid. And what do we have to do to fix this country? Because it's in a bad place, and it has been for many years now. If you think about it, the TV shows of many of our youth, what were these TV shows about? You looked at Happy Days, you looked at Leave It to Beaver, you looked at a lot of these shows. They all had a message. They all had a lesson, a message, even cartoons like Fat Albert. They all taught us morals and values and these life lessons. What are the TV shows now? The Kardashians, the housewives of this or that county, I couldn't even tell you. The Bachelor, who's going to get the rose. All these things, people, are distractions. The shows that have families, the structures are not like they used to be. It's the children disrespecting the family, the authority figures, the parents, and you have this canned laughter in the background enforcing that message. That's not a good message. We need to not just respect our families, our parents and our elders, but everyone, okay? We talk about immigrants, we're all immigrants. Unless you're an American Indian, you're an immigrant, okay? So we need to learn to love each other, we need to focus on solutions that are nonviolent, and we need to focus on educating, getting away from this programming, researching for ourselves outside of the paid media. And Trump brings up a lot of this. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff that he's doing, and I think we can all agree to that and attempting to do. But he's also awakened a lot of us about some of this corruption and things that are happening, behind the scenes. He doesn't call all the shots. It's higher up. So I just ask that you guys research that. There's ways we can affect the change without violence, without fear. People, my fellow board members, they mentioned earlier about going inside. That's important. Even if you meditate just 5 minutes a day. I know it can be a challenge, but put it in there. We need balance. It was mentioned a couple times previously this evening. We need balance. We're constantly bombarded with, messages, whether it's TV, radio, Facebook on the phone, advertising, all this stuff. We need to just shut down for a few minutes a day. Start out your morning, start out your night. Dr. Wayne Dyer, rest in peace, said, you wouldn't, have a day where you're working and doing all this physical labor and come home and not take a shower. Well, meditation is that shower for your mind. Even if it's 5 minutes in the morning to start your day off right, 5 minutes at night to release all that, to shed all that gook from the day, help get a better night's sleep, because this is when we recharge. This is when the mind does like a disk defrag and figures out everything for the day and puts it in a proper order the best it can. That's why we have bizarre dreams sometimes. So this is important. So I urge you to find a meditation program, whether it's focusing on your breath, a mantra, a guided meditation of some sort. Do something to balance on a daily basis, to not be so bombarded by these messages, and find that truth within yourself.
Thank you, that was very well said.
Yeah, I would say, listening to Seraphic Angel's story over many years, one of the things she said was when you need a question answered, whether it's out of fear or not, and your mental faculties don't get you to make a choice, or your textbooks, or your leaders, or your religious beliefs, run it through your heart. Ask your heart, because your heart won't
Right.
lie, and you'll know when the heart's speaking to you. Even in examples where we say our heart was broken through a relationship, hearts break, but they also have a tremendous healing ability. And Seth, along with that, said many times that our point of power is in the present. It's in the present moment. When we're being confronted by something that scares us, something that seduces us, we need to be in that moment, to trust that moment. And I just wanted to read a poem by Jane about the present moment as she saw it. And it's a little kind of like R.D. Laing's Knots, but that's what it reminds me of. And Jane wrote, today is tomorrow, and present is past. Nothing exists and everything will last. There is no beginning, there was no end. No depth to fail, no heights to ascend. There is only this moment, this flicker of light that illuminates nothing but oh so bright. For we are the spark that flutters in space, consuming an eternity.